Urgent update on Bitcoin. Today, July 9th. We're seeing the movement we talked about yesterday. The price movement is catching its breath a bit, so it can go after the middle of the channel again. That's what we saw. We're seeing exactly that movement. And today, what we're going to do is determine exactly over the next few days, starting today, July 9th, looking ahead to the weekend and the beginning of next week, what the expected movement in the price of Bitcoin will be. Before anything else, before we start looking, you already know that we look for price movement by analyzing the strategies actually used by the big players or institutions, since they're the ones who really move the market. It's not the retail traders or the indicators or anything like that. It's the big players who try to trick us. Before we get into that analysis, I'm going to tell you about the July challenge, which you already know what it's about. I started on July 1st with $500 on nextday.com, and every day I make micro trades. So you can see that in a very simple way, you can make money trading without any complications. Last month, I did the June challenge. I ended up with $727 and raffled off the excess. That is the $227. This month, I'll do the same. Right now, as you can see, the account is at $610, which means we've already made $110 in profit. I'll show you yesterday's trade, how it went. You can see that I use leverage. I enter with 10 and set take profit, that is TP, at $15. Then MEXC notifies me when the TP is executed, letting me know it's been completed. If you want to participate, that is, if you want to win those profits in the giveaway, all you have to do is sign up at altamx.com and make your first deposit. I'll do a drawing among everyone who meets this condition. Without further ado, let's get into the analysis of Bitcoin's price movement. As you already know, what we need to look for are the strategies used by the big players, who buy low and sell high, both on the way down, because with futures, you can buy at a higher level, wait for that markdown, and sell lower, or vice versa. That's how the big players operate. There are 4 phases in every time frame. Accumulation, which is where they load up their inventory. A markup phase, where they try to quickly trick retail investors who still think the price is going down. They push the price up fast and then sell. They do this over and over again, sometimes in several phases, always looking to deceive. But we see this structure time and time again. The larger the time frame, the easier it is to see that structure. That's why we always start with the weekly chart to see which phase of Wyckoff we're in. In my course, I explain these Wyckoff phases perfectly, how to identify them, how to find support and resistance levels, which are also fundamental for spotting these moves. But what we're doing in this video is giving a forecast for the next few days, knowing which phase we're in for the long term. I'm telling you right now that we're in an accumulation phase, always waiting for a markup when it reaches the upper zone. The upper zone of the long-term accumulation channel is around 69,000, and the lower zone is 60,000. As it gets closer, you know that the price always fine-tunes that movement a bit, but it's around that area. For example, here we saw that it stayed close but didn't quite reach it. It stopped at 67,200 and then started the downward movement looking for that support. It broke through it for a week and then started looking for the middle of the channel. It always makes that kind of nuanced move so that retail traders end up taking the opposite position and the big players can make money. What we do is spot those traps, so to speak, so we can enter in the most favorable way, not the way the indicators tell you, because that's how you'll end up losing money. Very good. As we've already seen, in the long term, we have that accumulation zone marked, and now we're seeing how, over these past weeks, it dropped to 60,000, went up to nearly 69,000, dropped again to 60,000, and now it's right in the middle of the channel. It touched the middle of the channel. And you already know that when it touches important elements, which are supports and resistances, 60 and 69, and the middle of the channel, there's always a reaction. Usually it's a big one, and then there's a follow-up move. We can see it clearly here. The last time it was in the middle of the channel, it spent a long phase accumulating. Now we're back in the middle of the channel, and we're waiting for a breakout, aiming for the 69,000 zone. It might be close, like last time at 67,700 or 68,000, but it's within that range. You know, these aren't exact lines, but rather a range or zones where it's going to have a strong reaction. Right now, it's catching its breath a bit and once again looking for that middle of the channel. We always have to watch to be sure of what the big players are doing. With price action, which is what we've been doing so far, we can get an idea of what the price is doing. But when the big players make their move, we can be more confident. It's clear that in trading, nothing is certain. Nothing's 100%, but it gives us a margin for projection, a very high probability margin. What we're looking for on the 4-hour chart are these volume spikes. Depending on how your chart is set up, in my case on mex.com using simple volume, on the 4-hour chart, it's above 1.5. All right, we have big players here, so that when the price moves, but it started to breathe, so to speak, to catch its breath a bit, facing the 60,000 mark again. The big players showed up, pushing it back to the middle of the channel. We saw it again when it tried to drop a bit more, and now in this area where it's catching its breath. We're not seeing such a clear sign of the big players right now. That's why we have to be very careful when it gets to the 64,000 zone, because it could drop again. It could catch its breath or start that move we've been waiting for. Between 67 and 69 would be the most likely area as it approaches the resistance zone. Let's wait for a candle with significant volume to appear, which will tell us that it's the big players taking action. One of these two things will happen. Either the movement will stop, like we saw in this area, or it will take off, which is what we're waiting for them to do. Because as long as there isn't a clue that makes the price leave the channel that is above 69 or below 60, the price will always fluctuate, moving from 69 to 60, from 60 to 69, with some action in the middle of the channel. We'll always see this as long as that kind of breakout doesn't show up. The way a breakout happens, you already know that to clearly break through these zones, the famous 1.5 volume spike has to appear, which means institutions are pushing it either down or up. Based on all the clues we have so far, everything points to the breakout being upward. But it's not here yet, not until it happens clearly. At 69, we can't know for sure, but in the long term, since it's an accumulation zone, the previous distribution was very small, we're expecting it to move around that area. Since it was so small, we're waiting for it to go over that zone. And now, in this second half of 2026, in the coming days, today is July 9th, we expect that, clearly by the weekend, and especially looking toward Monday or Tuesday, the price will already appear in this upper zone of the channel. That is, the area between 64 and 68, 69. That's what we're expecting. Let's look at each clue. You already know that I post updates every day because it's really important to pay attention to those small hints. That way, you can do proper swing trading or have a good week. Know what's happening in the long term, and above all, enter intraday trades in a really precise way. When I talk about intraday, I mean entering trades by the hour or even scalping, sometimes within minutes. In 30 or 15 minutes, we can see very clear movements. Here, for example, on the 1-hour chart, we're seeing these movements appear very accurately. We can set up support and resistance levels on every time frame, just like I explained in my course. Anyway, if what you're interested in is getting in right away, like we're doing now, in intraday scalping, on my BIP Telegram channel, I share the 2 trades I make in my personal trading. I make at least 2 trades a day, and I tell you the time and the asset I'm entering. Usually it's always Bitcoin, because that's the one everything else is based on. For example, I might give the entry on Bitcoin, but feel more comfortable. With Ethereum, 99% of the time, the movement is exactly the same. All right, for example, right now we're looking at the 1-hour chart. The movement's clearly upward, and then there's a pretty significant pause in this area. It looks like a doji, then you know we're always looking at Japanese candlestick patterns to enter scalping trades, or for intraday trading, and this gave us a clue that the price movement was going to pause. Now, what we need to do is wait for the next clue to see if the movement is going to be upward, which is what we're expecting, aiming for 64, maybe even higher, or if it's going to take a breather. That's why it's also important at this point to step away from the chart so you can enter in the best possible way. Usually there are 3 elements. We need to look for the price reaching a support or resistance level that we've marked on a lower time frame or on whichever time frame we're comfortable with. It has to be appropriate for what we're trading. For example, if we're trading intraday or scalping, it's better to keep in mind what's happening in the long term on the 4-hour chart. But above all, look at the 15 to 30 minute and 1-hour charts. The three elements we're looking for are price reaching support or resistance, the appearance of elements in Japanese candlesticks, such as wicks and dojis. Above all, what most determines the movement is the appearance of strong hands, which is shown by volume. When significant volume appears, 95% of the time, the price clearly reverses direction. I Mikel Vasquez, and this is Daily Bitcoin Analysis. I really appreciate you watching this video, and as I always say, this is not financial advice. I'm just sharing my experience with you after more than 15 years in professional trading. Stay alert to the clues that are constantly appearing on the chart, and I upload videos every day to make them very, very clear for you. See ya.